Joining me this afternoon on our panel of politicians, the Labor MP Kelvin Thomson and the National Senator John Williams. Good afternoon to both of you. John Williams, let's start with you. Obviously you are a National Senator,
yes.
You are not in the Liberal Party,
yes.
and no doubt you're pleased that today when you're appearing on this program you're not. But still, looking at what is going on within the Liberal Party, it's not helpful, is it, on a day like today when the polls are so bad for Labor to be focusing on internal party issues?
Well, you're correct, Ashley. I am a National. I don't know Alan Stockdale, I don't know Peter Reith, never met either of them. But yeah, it doesn't help, but I don't think the next election will be fought over this issue. The vote's been had, I think it's one margin, 57 to 56. The decision's been made. Lucky there was another voter there and it was a level pegging. That would have made it very interesting, but yeah, they'll move on from here and yeah, we'll focus on the real issues, but that's just one of those things that happens in those positions in the Liberal Party. Likewise, in the National Party, sometimes we have challenges for presidents, chairmen's positions, etc. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's over.
Tony Abbott, of course, is trying to make it over as well. He's saying let's all move on. But you would have observed the weekend's events pretty closely, no doubt. Do you think it's strange that Peter Reith seemed to be Tony Abbott's pick, but he didn't end up voting for him? Does that strike you as odd?
Yeah, I've seen a bit of the media, Ashley, and I don't know who Tony Abbott's pick was. I've never discussed it with Tony Abbott or any of the Liberals. Those sort of things, the Nationals leave the Liberals to run their organisation. We stay away from that. We run our organisation, so we've had nothing to do with it, but I've just watched the media, as many others have, of course, and that's how it's panned out. What
about Peter Reith's concerns about industrial relations? Would you like to see the coalition focus more on this as an issue, take the fight up to Labor on the changes that it made?
Well, one of my big issues with the industrial relations, Fair Work Australia, when they brought in the regulations, was a minimum 3 hours work for school children. I had many complaints to my office when people were saying to me, look, the kids get out of school, they get to work at 4 o'clock, we shut at 5:30, an hour and a half's work. We've got to pay them 3 hours wages. We don't like that. And it was encouraging cash payments, it was encouraging all sorts of things that were probably not correct by the rule book. Fair Work Australia has now ruled that those students do not have to be paid a minimum of 3 hours. That is a good thing. There are other issues that will be addressed in the future, but
should Tony Abbott take more of a role on this? Should he put more focus on this issue?
Well, Tony Abbott made it quite clear prior to the last election that the work choices are dead and buried, and I can assure you it is. What comes up in the future, if there are any minor fine-tuning issues, I don't know. I haven't discussed those issues with them. I've been more concentrating on things like our export of cattle and carbon taxes and various other issues, so we haven't discussed that. But I think that the small change has been made by Fair Work Australia. It's good for students seeking part-time work.
Okay, we are going to get to some of those other issues shortly. Kelvin, though, I would like to get your take on this. You would have heard Peter Reith's criticisms of the changes Labor made when it came to office. He claims that you rolled back the issue of IR to the way it was even before Labor was last in government. What do you make of those criticisms?
Good afternoon, Ashley, and good afternoon, John. I think that the extraordinary thing about the revelations concerning the Liberal Party presidency is the inference that Tony Abbott promised his support to both candidates, and I really think that he has an obligation to be honest with the Australian people about this. Did he in fact promise his support to both candidates? It tends to show a trait of his which is to seek to be friends to all sides. He says he supports the flood victims, but he's against the flood levy. He says he's against animal cruelty, but he wants to resume the live cattle exports to Indonesia. He says he supports action to cut carbon emissions, but he's against the carbon price. He says he wants to balance the budget, go into surplus, but he opposes Labor's savings measures. So that you've got someone here who is looking to walk both sides of the street rather than be clear with the Australian people about what his intentions are.
Well, we know what Labor's intentions are, and the Australian people don't like it when it comes to the carbon tax. Kelvin, you've seen the latest polls today showing us again that Labor is deeply unpopular, the carbon tax is deeply unpopular. Julia Gillard is now the most unpopular Prime Minister we've had since Paul Keating was on his way out. That must be a real hit to morale within the Labor Party.
Well, Ashley, no guts, no glory. It would be nice if we were able to go on with the way of living that we have without damaging the planet, without having the climate change and global warming occurring, unfortunately, that's not the case. We do have to reduce our carbon emissions, and our children and our grandchildren will not thank us if we run away from this and avoid this because it happens to be difficult, because it happens to be hard. Yes, it is hard, but we are determined to put a price on carbon, to act as a driver for reducing our carbon emissions so that we can take Australia and the planet away from what is presently a very dangerous path.
But still, is it a hit to morale? What do you feel like when you wake up and see paper after paper, poll after poll showing that Australians don't like the direction you're taking the country in?
Of course, these things aren't easy. It's always much more fun to be popular than to be unpopular. But the truth is that being in government is more than about being popular. It is about making the right decisions for this nation, the right decisions for this planet, the right decisions for our children and grandchildren. And we are convinced that it is necessary to reduce our carbon emissions and to put a price on carbon in order to achieve that. And being convinced of that, we have an obligation to do that for the future, to do that for our children.
John Williams, we've seen today that for the first time Tony Abbott in the news poll is now the preferred Prime Minister over Julia Gillard, only by 1 point, but still, of course, we mark that. Tony Abbott, though, it seems that it's because Julia Gillard's popularity is dropping. It's not that his support is rising. Do you think that Tony Abbott is making the most of this? Perhaps should be
Ashley,
doing better
how often do you see the opposition leader more popular than the Prime Minister? Very rare over my lifetime. And you're right, it's Julia Gillard's popularity dropping. She holds the highest office in the nation. She stands in front of the television prior to the election, says there'll be no carbon tax under any government I lead, and backed up by her Deputy Prime Minister and Treasurer, Wayne Swan. Then the election's over, in comes the carbon tax with the pressure of the Independents and the Greens. People feel betrayed. You cannot make a commitment to the Australian people on such an important issue as a $10 or $11 billion tax that's going to be then somehow dished out around to save the pain. We're going to inflict the pain, then we're going to ease the pain by giving you money. You can't do that, and that along with many other issues such as the waste of money, the increase of debt. I mean, they've got to extend the credit card now by $50 billion from $200 to $250 billion. And we've seen so much money wasted. Sure, people focus more on Julia Gillard than Tony Abbott. She is the Prime Minister, and hence people are turning away from her.
Of course, the next election isn't for another couple of years. The next scheduled election anyway isn't for a couple of years. So, Kelvin Thomson, we keep hearing that Julia Gillard keeps telling all of you in caucus that for the party it's important for Labor to focus on the long-term strategy. Today we've heard some ministers, Craig Emerson on AM Agenda this morning was comparing Julia Gillard to John Howard, pointing out that when John Howard first announced the GST, we saw that Kim Beazley then was the preferred Prime Minister over John Howard. And so Craig Emerson today was saying, don't count your chickens yet to the coalition. But how confident are you, Kelvin Thomson, that you can actually turn this around, that time frame will see Australians eventually get behind the carbon tax? It'll be a huge turnaround if Julia Gillard can pull it off.
I think, Ashley, that there is some analogy with the GST, and people like Craig Emerson and I, when we were in opposition, we remember that we were doing very well while this issue was being debated, but once John Howard's full package was in place and implemented, the caravan moved on, and frankly much of the effort that we'd put into opposing the GST was wasted. So I think that this debate has a long way to go, and that people will become aware that it's not the government's intention with the carbon price to try and make money. If we were to bring in, for example, the $10 or $11 billion that Senator Williams referred to, that none of that money will stay with the government. All of that will go back out, much of it to people in terms of income tax cuts or pension rises or a combination of those things. So the government is not seeking to try to make any money out of this, and therefore people will not individually be worse off. off. It is not a tax which is being collected on people individually. What it is a price which the 1,000 highest polluters will have to pay as an incentive to them to move away from the high carbon economy towards renewable energy.
Yeah, well, and of course a lot of this is all speculation because we still don't even know what the carbon tax is, what the compensation packages will be for households and industry. So we're all waiting with bated breath to find out those details, and we'll bring them to you. It looks like it's still a couple of weeks away, though, until we do find out all those details. John Williams, I do want to ask you about an issue I know is close to your heart, live exports, the trade ban to Indonesia. You've been taking up the plight, I know, of cattle producers. Yesterday we saw the government announce a $3 million compensation package for workers who have been affected by that trade ban. Do you welcome that?
Well, $3 million, Ashley, to cancel $320 million of income. I mean, it's a token, and to me it's demeaning when people lose their jobs because of a government decision and they're going to get $214 a week. I mean, it is demeaning.
But $320 million, that's over, that's not over
that's
a
a
few
12-month.
weeks.
That's a 12-month period.
We're not.
But
no one's saying this ban's going to continue on for a year.
Well, it's looking as though it's not progressing very fast. We have 7 A-class abattoirs. Elders have the ships, the feedlots, the abattoirs there. Why aren't we sending cattle there now? And the thing is that Indonesia is getting annoyed. There was no consultation with Indonesia before the blanket suspension went on. We run the risk of losing the market to some other country. Packaged meat. I mean, you've got to ask the question, is Indonesia going to continue to eat beef? Yes. Can they supply their own beef? No. They will import beef. Their cheapest way is doing it live. We have the industry established, much better systems as far as freighting them on the ships where they actually fed well, watered well and put on weight. Then into feedlots, we've now lost the sales of grain to those feedlots, not only just the cattle. It's a $320 million cattle price plus the grain. This is bleeding people up there. What do the station owners say when they go to their bank manager and say, we do not have any sale of cattle? Well, how do you pay your bank interest? Well, I can't. Look at the pressure on the families. Look at the financial worries, the unemployment, the helicopter pilots, the truckies. It goes right through. It's an overreaction. We should have stopped the export to those abattoirs doing the wrong thing and kept the flow on to those ones doing the right thing.
Kelvin Thomson, it has moved on from that initial debate. Of course, when we first heard the ban was announced, there was still a lot of outrage over those pictures we'd all seen on Four Corners showing animal cruelty. Now, though, the debate's really on how the government's handled these situations since then. And as you just heard, there's a lot of criticism that the government is acting too slow, that's taking too long to get the trade back up and running. We're hearing the coalition calling for Kevin Rudd, the foreign minister, to step in and go to Indonesia personally because they keep telling us that they don't think Joe Ludwig's doing a good enough job.
If we simply resume the live exports now without putting in place proper tracking mechanisms and proper monitoring and procedures like stunning, we would see a return to the unacceptable animal cruelty which we witnessed on the Four Corners program. As far as I am concerned, this trade should not resume until we can be absolutely guaranteed that we will never again witness the kind of footage we saw then. And I've had cattle producers from Northern Australia contacting me to say they don't want to see the trade resume under those circumstances. Some have said they support the domestic processing industry. It should be remembered that the Howard government suspended live cattle exports to Egypt in 2006 following similar revelations of animal cruelty. It did not resume the trade for about 3 years. The sky did not fall in. We need to make sure that we have got this right.
Okay, Kelvin Thomson and John Williams, we are out of time. That's another issue we've got a way to go on. Thank you for coming in this afternoon. We appreciate it. Coming up after the break,
to talk with you.
We're going to be looking at developments in US politics overnight and look at some of the people who are putting up their hands to be the next President of the United States. Stay with us.